This is Andrew here with Tower Electric Bikes, and today I'm going to show you how to swap out your rear cassette on your Tower Electric bike. Now over time, the rear cassette here will start to wear down. Now the one I have on here is realistically in pretty good shape. You know, all the teeth are nice and in their appropriate shape that they should be, fresh, brand new out of the box. But over time, the teeth on these cassettes will start to wear out. Will start to get a little more pointed, look a little bit like shark teeth. They will go in line with your chain wearing as well. So as always, stay on top of your chain stretch. If you run a stretch chain for too long, that will definitely prematurely wear your cassette as well as your front chain ring. But swapping out the cassette is easy enough as long as you have the proper tools. Now this is a cassette here on the rear. If you have a Beach Bum V1, it will not have a cassette, it will have a freewheel, which is a little bit of a different process. This video is strictly for the Beach Bum V2 and Beach Babe, which do feature a regular cassette. Now the cassette that is on here is an 1134 cassette. Now what that means is the smallest ring inside here has 11 teeth and the largest ring has 34 teeth. Now that 34 teeth, that is going to be sort of your bailout ring, you know, the ring you switch into to make it easier to climb. So that's sort of the upper limit of cassette sizes that you can have. You can go smaller, like the cassette I do have to install here is an 1128. So this cassette will be a little bit faster. That upper ring won't be as easy to pedal as this one, where this one's definitely styled for climbing. But realistically, as long as your 7-speed cassette, that upper tooth is less than 34 or at 34, you can install that cassette on your bike. Now obviously switching cassette ring sizes, you will have to adjust your rear derailleur a little bit, as your high limit screw may have to be adjusted, but that will be taken care of in another video. Today I'm going to show you how to swap these out. So tools you will need for this job: you will need an 18mm wrench and a 10mm wrench. These are used for removing the wheel from the bike. And then to actually remove the cassette from the bike, we have two other tools. We have this Park Tool cassette ring tool. This one is the FR 5.2H. Now this is the slightly newer design. Some of Park Tool's older designs, instead of being hollow like this, will have sort of a long pin that comes out in the middle. Those will not work on this bike. Those are sort of strictly made for regular bicycles with quick release axles. Well, this is obviously an e-bike wheel and has a solid threaded axle instead of a quick release. So the handy thing about this tool is obviously it has this nice wide opening here so we can slot over that power cable. And then the last tool we have is the more modern chain whip. This is the CP 1.2. If you have an older chain whip, that will also work as well. This is just the newer style that Park Tool has come out with for as an alternative to the traditional chain whip, where instead of having to find the right direction to whip that chain on, you just grab it with these guys. So these are pretty cool. I definitely I like these. So we will get to it. So first step is remove that rear wheel. If you need to know how to remove the rear wheel, we do go into it a little more in depth in our rear wheel removal video. So right now I will just sort of jam through the wheel removal process. So yeah, as always, you want to loosen the axle bolts, axle nuts. Right, now the whole rear wheel is going to come right out with us. There we go. All right, so now that we have the rear wheel removed, now comes time for the fun part, to remove the cassette. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these extra things off of that power cable. We're going to take off the axle nuts, the washer, little guard. We will also take off the washers here. So remember the order that these go on. So once you get the axle nut and the washer off, then you have that little L-shaped nut that comes off. Remember its orientation. And then you will also have just individual regular old washers here. Now, depending on the model of bike you have, it may be one larger washer, it may be two smaller washers inside there, but just grab those and set them to the side. So now that everything has been removed from the interior of the bike, of the interior of that axle, we're going to set it down sort of on a flat surface. I'm just doing it on my lap. You could be doing this on a workbench or something, but you want to make it so the cassette side is facing up. And you're going to take your cassette lock ring tool, and you'll see there's these splines along the edge here. Well, we have matching splines along the top of the cassette. So what we're going to do is we're just going to thread that through, and you will see it slots in place perfectly. But what you'll find is, as we turn it in the way to unscrew it, that just spins the cassette around. That is where these fun guys come in handy. Basically all they do is, you'll see they have little chains on either side. They just slot over the teeth and hold it in place. If you have a chain whip, you'll obviously loop it around and hold it in place and then give counter torque. So once you're holding that cassette in place, just rotate this guy around, and it's really stiff at first, but then once it sort of breaks that seal, then it's very, very easy to unscrew. And realistically, all you're unscrewing with this tool is you are taking off, there's a lock ring here that holds everything in place. So you can see once that lock ring comes off, then we can remove the whole cassette. And basically what the cassette is it's just a series of rings that slots onto the wheel itself. See? So we have a few loose rings, and the rest of the rings are all fixed together. So the cassette, and that's sort of the difference between a cassette and a freewheel. The cassette is just a series of rings that slots onto a free hub body that rotates around on its own, where a freewheel has all of the pawls and bearings built into it and then just threads onto here. And then you will also see that there will be some cassette spacers here on the bottom. Whatever cassette spacers you see on the bottom, just leave those there. Chances are you will still need them for your new cassette, so just keep those in place. I'll show you how to check if you do or do not need them towards the end here. So I'm just getting my new cassette unboxed. All right. And this one's a little bit easier than the cassette that came off, in that it has a little bit less rings. This one only has 2 extra rings, where the other one had 3. And so basically the next step is if you look at these splines, you'll see they're all about the same size except for one of them. One of them will be real skinny. So then if you spin this free up body around, you can find the skinny one. And I can see it right here. So just line those up, and then the whole thing will slide right down. I think I actually have to take one of these spacers off. So if you saw what happened, I slotted this on, it wasn't going down all the way. This one's rubbing up against something on here. Now, bear in mind, this is a pretty worn Beach Babe. It's been worn quite a bit. It's one of our demo models here, so surprised there's a little bit of scoring on this free hub that making it a little more difficult to get this slotted on. But it's no problem, we can't work through. There's that small ring, there it is. There we go. See, and as you can see, slotted on perfectly, and then we still have a little bit sticking up here. Obviously we have a last ring that we got to get slotted on, and this last ring you want to be careful with, because There's not a lot of spline for it to really bite down on. So you want to be sure that it's properly slotted on there, because if it's not, you know, it's easy to get it pushed into a tightened down into a spot where it's not necessarily biting everything. But we have it there. It's all good to go and tightened down, or in place. So now what we do is we're going to take this lock ring, obviously threading side down. I'm going to slide it over, and then we're going to get this biting down first before we start hitting it with the tool. So it's already been biting down there. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to take that cassette ring tool, slot that into splines again. And this time we don't need the cassette lock ring tool, because obviously the free hub body, that's the way it makes the wheel move. So it already has something holding it in place. All right, you can hear that tightening down real well for us. All right, and that is nice and firm on there. Now, one of the things you do want to check with your cassette is if there's any play in any of these, like if this is rocking back and forth, and this is as tight as it goes, that's where we'd know we'd need a spacer. Now this one had a few spacers on it already, so realistically didn't need any, but if you pulled those spacers off and just installed this straight away and you notice it's wiggling back and forth on you, you would probably need to take this off, add a spacer, reinstall, tighten down, assess if there's any more play, and once the play goes away, you are good to go. So there we are, nice shiny new cassette all installed. Now what we're going to do is we're going to reinstall the wheel, but first we have to get these washers that we uninstalled in place. So remember, first are just the plain small basic washers. Those slot in. Then we're going to take that ever important little L-shaped one, and the L is going to, if you see the cable here, see how it has this little cutout on the bottom? The L is always going to match up with that little cutout. It's always going to be facing down. And we also want that L facing out towards us. So there we go. Those are all, the stack has been reinstalled. And then I'm just going to slide the axle washer and axle nut back on here just so they're in place, but I'm not going to tighten them down quite yet because I like to do that after we get the wheel installed. So you are going to take your 10 millimeter and your 18 again, and we will get reinstalling onto the bike. All right, once that axle's in place, just get these axle nuts all tightened down again. All right, now that the wheel is remounted, then we will just slide the cover back on, plug the bad boy in, remember, arrow to arrow, reroute the cable, and just like that, you are good to go and your new cassette has been installed. Now remember, the cassette we installed on here is a different size than the one we put on previously, so we will have to tune this derailleur a little bit. If you do put on a different cassette other than that 1134 that came on it, you will have to do a little bit of adjustment on here. For how to do that, I definitely recommend checking out our derailleur adjustment video for a little more details. But that is how you install a cassette on your new tower bike. Thanks for joining us.